Hello and welcome to ITERS Item number 7, which is about responding to children's communication. It's not about developing children's communication or supporting children's communication. Obviously, we do those things if we respond correctly to children's communication. But this item in the Infant and Toddlers Environmental Rating Scale is all about responding to children's communication. So in this short video, I'm going to give you some top tips about communicating with children and some supporting children's communication. And then we're going to go through and we're going to look at the ITERS rating scale for inadequate, minimal, good and excellent. And of course, what we want to do is to move everyone down to excellent if we possibly can do that. And of course, as you know, the ITERS rating scale, it's not about your practice as an individual practitioner. It's about what's happening in your early years classroom, in your early years provision, in your nursery, in your setting, or in your home childcare environment. And the rating is all the way from 1, which is inadequate and needs urgent improvement, all the way down to 7, which is definitely an excellent. So let's jump in and look at Sammy's top tips. So my top tips for communicating with children are as follows. Listen actively to what children communicate. And remember, when we're thinking about small children, they're not communicating only, if at all, with language, but they're communicating with their whole being. So thinking about what they're communicating through their cries, through their body language, through their movement, through their pointing. And it means that you need to be switched on, totally switched on to what's going on in your early years classroom, and not just you, all the early years practitioners that are working in the room. Respond positively to all children's attempts to communicate. So if it's grabbing, if it's pointing, if it is using language, that is met with a positive response from the early years practitioners that are working in that room or in that space with the children. Model good communication. So when you respond to children's communication, model calm, mediated responses to whatever it is that the children are communicating or attempting to communicate. Model good communication by using clear and accurate language. Model good communication by making eye contact with the children, by speaking to the children in a soft and gentle, reassuring and positive way. Talk to the children at their level. All of those things that we know are good communication skills. Model that when you're responding to children. Expand on children's communication. Rice. Oh, would you like some more rice? Let me get you some more rice for your plate. Would you like 1 more spoon of rice or 2 more spoons of rice? Obviously, that's an example. It might not be connected to rice. The communication could be anything. There's infinite possibilities on what children might want to communicate to you. And provide individual attention to children. When children are communicating, try to support the early years team that are working with them to give individual attention to children, rather than treating children as a mass, a blob, a group. See and notice, pay attention to every child in that group, and as such think about what it is that they're communicating to you and respond to them individually. Okay, that's my first top tips for communicating with children, and if you're already doing those things, you're already 5 spaces towards excellent. And the next slide is my final top tips. And then we're going to jump in and we're going to start looking at and exploring the ITERS standard for item 11. Okay, so in your early years practice, notice subtle cues. That might be eye contact from a child. That might be a child stirring as they're starting to get hungry, an infant, for example. And try in your responses to children's communication to respond to non-verbal cues. So not just language, but it could be crying, it could be pointing, it could be rolling, it could be grabbing, it could be reaching, it could be taking a toy or something from another child. That is a form of communication. So try to respond to all of that. Create in the early years provision that you're in the room, in the environment, in the area. Create a relaxed atmosphere where talk and communication is encouraged and is common. So again, that comes back to the staff in the room modeling and creating a relaxed environment through their actions and your words and your tone as well. I've already said use positive and encouraging language. We know about praise. We know that praise should be specific. So praise children's attempts to communicate. I can see you're upset. Well done for letting me know. What is it that you want? I'm here. How can I help? I'm here for you. And show interest in what children are communicating. For older children, that might be them showing you something, bringing something to you. For younger children, it might be more subtle or less clear ways of communicating, but show interest. Demonstrate to the children that you are interested in them and what they have to communicate. If you are doing all of these wonderful Sammy's top tips, you're already halfway or more to excellence. So let's jump in and let's start to look at the ITERS rating scale. So right here, down the bottom of the scale, at a number 1. If you're doing any of these things, you are at a number 1 and you cannot go higher. You cannot score higher than a number 1 if you're doing any of these things at all, basically. So an inadequate early years environment for item 11, responding to children's communication, would look like this. Staff in the room, there would be little or no satisfying response to children's crying or signs of being upset. And that might be because the staff are not in close enough proximity to notice that, or they're hearing the crying but they're not responding, and that might be either because they're not interested or because they are busy with other tasks. And of course, that might be because there's not enough staff. That's fine, but it still means it's inadequate. Even if the staff are doing their best to respond to crying, if they are busy with other tasks and unable to respond, it means that the setting, the room, is inadequate, and that might be because of the inadequate staffing levels. So, staff usually show little interest or little response to children's attempts to communicate, either verbally or non-verbally. So what might that look like? Staff might ignore a child who is trying to reach for a toy or signaling in some way that they want to be picked up. They might not name food that the child is pointing to. So that could be a lunchtime or a snack scenario with children pointing to food, but staff not responding and not naming it and using language, as I said in my top tips, to support and respond positively and effectively and wholly to children's communication. So in an inadequate environment, we would also see frequent, negative responses to children's communication. For example, that might be a staff punishing a child, sending them out of the circle time because they're not wanting to participate or they're unable to participate. And that, of course, could be dealt with really positively. Oh, Nathan, I see that's really hard for you. Would you like to go and help Gillian set the table for lunch? Come, Gillian, Nathan wants to help you. That would be a positive response. A negative response would be something like, Nathan, I've told you twice already to sit still and take part in circle time, and I can see you're not able to do it. So I'm left with no choice but to banish you. Or maybe not banish, but to remove you from circle time. Go and sit over there on a chair. Leave the room. Leave the space. That is a punishment scenario. Whereas you see my scenario in the beginning was very different. It was about recognizing that the child is communicating that they're not able to take part, that they don't want to take part, or they're unwilling to take part, and kind of punishing them, really. Well, the second example was punishing. The first example that I gave was finding an alternative, listening, tuning in and finding an alternative. That wouldn't be happening in an inadequate environment. Rather, it would be a punishment or a removal scenario. Staff might roughly grab a child or move them if they're taking something from someone else. Eitan, I've told you not to take things from him, that he had it first. Stand away. That would be inadequate. The child is communicating to you or to the room that they want something, and instead of recognizing, oh, Eitan, I see that you want that, but Raz had it first. Come with Sammy, let's see if we can find another one. Rather than, don't pull, I've already told you that before. That would be inadequate. Or shaming a child that's crying. There's nothing to cry for. Stop that now. Oi, I can see you're upset. Would you like a cuddle? Let's see if we can find something else for you to do. That would be the appropriate response. Okay, so we've got the idea of what inadequate is. If you're doing any of those things, if those things are happening, any of those things are happening in a room that you're working in, then that is inadequate and you cannot move up the rating scale. Let's look at minimal. So if you are achieving, you would need to be achieving at least all of these minimals and building on that in order to move higher up the rating scale. So minimal, we're looking at 4 standards here, and the first one, a moderately satisfying response to children who are upset. So, for example, staff might supply verbal reassurance for a crying or fussy or difficult child before the problem is resolved. Very unhappy children are noticed and responded to. However, a less obviously upset child might not be noticed. And of course, it's difficult for early years practitioners, especially if it's a high ratio, to notice all of that. But in order to achieve the minimal, it might be that you notice the big things, but some of the little things that children are communicating through crying, for example, is left unnoticed. Staff show some interest and respond to children's verbal and non-verbal communication throughout the day. So, for example, staff comment on toys that children show them. They might say things like, oh, you want to get up? Or if a child's standing up at sleep time, oh, you finished sleeping now. But it's limited. And it's not communicating and responding with your whole being, and it's not noticing the little things. So if that describes what's going on in your setting or your classroom, that is minimal. The next standard says that staff provide a relaxed environment that encourages children to talk, to vocalize, and that's happening throughout the day. So, for example, there's no strict control of the children, and the staff remain calm and positive throughout the day. That is a meeting that you need to be doing that as a minimum in order to achieve this standard. So staff generally respond neutrally or positively, but not negatively, to children's communication, with only very mild negative instances that don't result in lasting distress for the children, the room, or the situation. So if those 4 criteria describe what's going on, your setting is minimal. Let's look at the good criteria. We have 4 good criteria, so we're going to look at the first 2 on this slide. So to be good in responding to children's communication, here at item 11 on the ITERS scale, then staff in that room would usually respond to crying or upset children with a satisfying result. With this not happening only a few times in the day, something wasn't noticed, someone wasn't picked up, a staff was too busy to deal with something immediately, that would only happen very few times in the day in order to come out at good. Staff would usually be responding to crying and upsetting children immediately, supporting their emotional well-being and bringing them back to happiness or satisfying their needs super fast. Okay, there is much positive and no negative response to children's communication throughout the day. Staff show much positive interest in what the children communicate to them. So, pardon me, staff pay close attention. They give children appropriate reassurances and responses. They smile, they're excited, they're concerned, and this is what's happening in the room. These 2 criteria, if those things are happening, you're on your way to a good early years setting that is showing good demarcations for ITERS Item 11, responding to children's communication. Staff show lots of positive interest in what the children are communicating to them, and this means that staff are paying close attention. They're giving appropriate emotional responses to the children, and staff say words that the child is trying to communicate. They reinforce, you're hungry. That's Maria's doll. Let's find something else for you to play with. The staff are generally keyed in and responding to what the children are doing. So let's jump on to look at the 3 excellent criteria. In order to meet excellent, you must be meeting all of the good and you must be meeting all of the minimal. So building on that, heading up towards the number 7, in an excellent early years provision, an excellent room, staff generally respond to children's subtle communication. So for example, they're not waiting for a child to be screaming and breaking down. They notice subtly the initial and early signs of communication, the subtle cues that I talked about in Sammy's top tips, and they notice, for example, this is just an example, that when a child shows mild hunger, they're already preparing the child's feed for them. They might end an activity or a learning experience or an immersive experience when the children are no longer interested, when they're showing that they're bored. And those signs of boredom will be shown differently for different children, but the staff are able to respond and understand what it is that the children are communicating. Staff show sensitive, individualized attention, and responses to children throughout the day are individual, and they respond differently to different children at different times throughout the day. So, for example, a staff member might stop feeding a child and wait till they're ready for the next spoon, although I don't think it's good practice to spoon food to a child, but if you are doing that, that it is responsive to what the child's communicating to you. For example, in circle time, a child who is finding it difficult to sit still might be saying, right, everyone jump up, let's do some big running around, let's put some music on when I stop running. We might switch what we're doing to meet the children's needs through what we can see they're communicating through children's behaviour, through not being able to sit still, fidgeting, finding it difficult, etc., etc. Let's change. Okay, let's go outside. Or it might be just for that one child. Eitan, would you like to go outside with Marielle and help her with the bricks outside? Bang, he's gone. We can continue circle time with the other children. We've met his need in a positive, reassuring, supportive way. We've responded quickly to what it is that he's communicating to us. Staff add more words or ideas to expand on what the children are saying. For example, if a child holds up the toy, the staff member might say, yes, that's the blue truck. I can see it has wheels. Can you see the wheels? Or a child says banana and the staff say, yes, it's a banana. We need to open and peel the skin before we can eat it, can't we? Would you like to help me do that? Okay, so choose the banana that you want. This is responding innately, individually, quickly, in positive ways to what children are communicating. So think about your practice, think about your room, think about where you work, where are you on the rating scale? And if you're not already there, what can you be doing to strive towards excellence?